Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu salamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd, fa'auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We always start by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we always start by sending peace and salutations upon Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his companions and his family. Okay. Now, we were discussing the story of Sayyidina Zaynab radhiyallahu anha. She was the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Her husband Abul As was fighting in the Battle of Badr against the Muslims. He was captured, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam decided to release him under one condition, and the condition was that when you go back to Makkah, then you have to release Sayyidina Zaynab, and you have to send her back. So Abul As lived up to his word, and when he went back to Makkah, he decided to start the preparations of sending Sayyidina Zaynab radhiyallahu anha to Al-Madinah. Ibn Ishaq rahmatullah alayh says that so she continued making plans, okay, about going back. Okay. When she was ready, so she started preparing to go back. When she was ready, her husband's brother Kinana ibn Rabi'a brought a camel, which she mounted, and he, taking his bow and quiver, led her away. She was riding in a hoji, and it was daytime. So it was basically like a small box type thing, which is kept on the top of the camel for the ladies to sit in. And he held the camel by the reins near the camel's mouth, and he started taking her, and he had his bow and his arrow. So he's the brother of Abul As. He's not a Muslim, but he's honoring the word of his brother, and he's honoring the fact that he has to take Sayyidina Zaynab radhiyallahu anha to Al-Madinah. And this was during daytime. Now, during the daytime, some of the Quraysh men discussed this and followed after her, catching up with her at Dota'a. That's a place, okay? The first to reach her was Habbar ibn Aswad ibn Mutalib. This was a person called Habbar. He was a kafir. He reaches up to it. Now remember, this is in the background of the Quraysh losing the Battle of Badr, right? Now they were looking at this act as a humiliation. That look, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is asking his daughter to come back. She's going back during daytime. Okay, so this was something that they felt as a humiliation. Now, what this person did was he scared her with his spear as she was there in the hall. And because, as they claim, she was expecting a baby, she was in the family way, she was expecting a baby, she suffered a miscarriage because of this. So she scared her. The camel got scared. Maybe she fell down. Maybe she got hurt. And as a reason, she lost her baby. Okay, so this was something very tragic. Her brother-in-law, yani Kinana, then knelt down, took his arrows from his quiver, and said, "By Allah, if any man comes near me, I'll put an arrow right into him." So now he's preparing himself to defend Sayyidina Zaynab radhiyallahu anha. Okay, there's a fight about to start, and then the men drew away from him, and then Abu Sufyan. Now Abu Sufyan, if you remember, is the leader of the Quraysh, especially now that Abu Jahl is dead. Abu Sufyan was the same person who was leading the main caravan that the Muslims were about to attack. Okay. Now, these men drew away from him, and then Abu Sufyan arrived at the scene with some other Qurayshi leaders. And he said, "Put down your arrows so we can talk with you." He did so. Abu Sufyan drew near him and said, "You have not done well. Okay, this is not something which is good." And he said, "You came forth with a woman openly going over people's heads, even though you are aware of the injury and damage done to us by Rasulullah." Now, what is he saying? That what you've done is not good. What is not good? Not that you've taken her out, but the fact that you have taken her out in the bright daylight, in the broad daylight, right? Right in the morning, you have decided to take her out, especially when you know Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has injured us in Badr. So they were feeling sad because of this. When you took away his daughter openly, regardless of anyone else, the people thought this was due to the humiliation we had undergone, and that this reflected our weakness and incapacity. Now he's saying that you're humiliating us, that in broad daylight you're taking the daughter of Rasulullah. Now people will think that we are incapable and we are weak. And like we've seen, the Arab culture is a very tribal culture. Everything is fed off your power and your tribal power. Now, if this is happening, people will say Quraysh is losing its prestige. So Abu Sufyan then further continues, I swear we don't want to keep her from her father and we are not after revenge, but you'd better return back. Then you can secretly take her away to her father. Now, Abu Sufyan gives a bit of context. He said, we are not opposed to keeping Zainab Razilatala anha away from her father. Okay, it's not that we want to keep her away and we are not after revenge. Now, these are still, there is some honor in the people of Quraysh because, in modern warfare, if you have somebody fighting you, the people do such bad things, they go after their families also. But the Quraysh said, we are not going to go after Zainab Razilatala anha. Okay, but take her secretly. Don't take her out in the open. Okay, so that was his mashwara. So they chose you that these kuffar of Quraysh, they respected women, unlike the enemies of Allah today who violate the rights of Muslim women and Muslim children. So anyway, Zainab Razilatala anha reached safely to Medina. Now, modern wars, you see, they don't even in the war in Gaza, you see, they don't disregard women, sisters, children, granddaughters, grandmothers. They don't distinguish anything. So today's enemies are much worse than the kuffar of Quraysh. Okay. So then what Kinana essentially did was he took her away secretly and then she reached safely and she was reunited with her father. So that is the end of the story of the return of Sayyidina Zainab Razilatala anha back to her father. Okay. Now, the next story that we're going to learn about is about another interesting person. His name is Abu Azza. Okay, again, one of the prisoners of war. Abu Azza was another prisoner of war. He said, Ya Rasulullah, you know my state of finances. I am poor. I have a family. So be gracious to me. Abu Azza had daughters to take care of and he was poor. Now, he was a person who was fighting on the side of the Quraysh. He fell in the hands of the Muslims. He became prisoner. But he did not have the money. He had daughters that he had to raise and he was poor. So he was asking Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for clemency. What does clemency mean? For him to be returned back without giving any ransom. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was considerate of his situation. So he said, I am going to allow you to be freed. However, I have a condition, and the condition is that you do not support anyone against me. So Rasulullah is a kind-hearted person. He is a big-hearted, gracious person. So he hears the plea of Abu Azza and he says, okay, I will release you without any ransom. And after releasing you without any ransom, you have to make a promise that you're not going to support anybody against me. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I'm going to allow you to be freed. Okay, this time you came out against me fighting in the battle of Badr. Next time you refused to fight against Muhammad and his followers. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, okay, fine, you came out in Badr, but don't fight against me ever again. Okay, so that was the condition under which he was released. Abu Azza then agreed to these conditions. But what did Abu Azza do? Abu Azza, in the battle of Uhud, the people of Quraysh were able to seduce him into joining them again. And subhanallah, he fought against the Muslims and subhanallah, he again fell in the hands of the Muslims. So he made a pact with the Muslims to go back after Badr and never to fight against, but he broke his word. So Sumayya and Ibrahim were right. He basically broke his word, right? And again, he fell in the hands of Muslims. So again, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I am very poor. I have daughters to raise. So please forgive me. And now this time I promise I'm not going to do it. Pin. Abu Azza makes the same excuses. But then what does Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? And this is a lesson for all of us. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I will not let you stroke your beard and say that you have deceived Muhammad twice. So it's like, look at me. So it's like you're stroking your beard and you have deceived me twice. So the first time at Badr, you gave me your word that you're not going to fight. And again, you came back to me after Uhud and now you're asking for the same excuse. So I am not going to be allowed to be deceived. Okay, that's what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wasn't sentimental. He wasn't the sort who would be tricked or deceived. He was kind and passionate, tolerant, but at the same time, he would not allow Muslims to take advantage of his good qualities to harm the Muslims. Okay, so remember something. Always be kind, always be generous, always be good to people, but do not let people take advantage of Muslims. Okay, so if somebody is taking advantage of your brother, if somebody is taking advantage of your sister, you should stand out for them. Okay, then there is no thought of being kind or something. If some that's like somebody is either deceiving somebody, you have, give me 500 rupees more, give me 1,000 rupees more, give me this, or somebody is trying to patronize your friends or yourself. Do not then be taken advantage of. Okay, this is an important lesson for Muslims. So what happens? Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam ordered the execution at the spot. So Abu Azza was killed on the spot. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, a believer will not be bitten twice from the same layer. This is a hadith, this is a very famous hadith कि एक मुसलमान जो है वो एक ही होल से दो दफा सांप उसको ना काटे. ठीक है? So one time if you fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That's the essence of the message. This is an important message for the Muslims. Muslims should not be gullible and become prey by deceptive words. A Muslim should be alert and know that what and who are there to benefit Islam and Muslims and who are there to harm the Muslims, right? So do not be taken advantage of. Now I want to ask you guys a question because this happens to us quite a lot, right? Okay, so this is an important lesson. Do not be taken advantage of. Okay. Now the next story that we have, like I said, that we will do several stories. The next story is a person called Suhail ibn Amr. He was one of the really senior leaders of Quraysh. He was a very eloquent person. What does eloquent mean? Eloquent means somebody who speaks very beautifully. Somebody speaks who very, very nicely. His words have some magical element to him. So Suhail ibn Amr, he became Razilat al later. Suhail ibn Amr, one of the nobility, one of the leaders of Quraysh, he was taken as a prisoner of war. Okay. And during the time of the Jahiliyyah world, what he used to say was he used to say a lot of bad things about Islam. He used to give speeches, he used to talk to people, and because his speech was strong, right? If you hear anybody on TV who has a strong speech, you are immediately captivated by them, right? So this person used to speak well, he has nice things to say and everything. So this person was using that quality that he had against Islam. Okay. Umar bin al-Khattab anhu said, Ya Rasulullah, let me extract the two teeth of Suhail ibn Amr, so his tongue will protrude and he will never be able to lie against you or speak ill against you. So now he's a prisoner. Umar anhu says, I'll break his teeth, so he won't be able to speak properly and he will get a proper lesson. Okay. Umar anhu wanted to mutilate his mouth so that Suhail won't be able to speak properly again as a lesson for his bad deeds. Okay, so he's after revenge, Sayyidina Umar anhu, because this same person used to speak ill of Rasulullah. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I will not mutilate him because Allah could mutilate me. Now Rasulullah is afraid. How should I mutilate? Mutilate का मतलब क्या होता है? आपकी ज़बान काट दें, कान काट दें, नाक काट दें, disfigure करना आपको. This is known as mutilate. Okay, this is not the Islamic way. So Islam will never allow you to mutilate people. Okay, this is not the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said, maybe he will take a stand for which you will not criticize him. Now he has an advantage. If you remember many months ago, I gave you the lesson during the time when Rasulullah was making Masjid al-Nabawi. He used specialization. What does specialization mean? That every person is good at something. If somebody is good at carrying bricks, he will carry bricks. If somebody is good at making bricks, he will make bricks. Is somebody good at geometry, making the wall straight, Rasulullah will use him that. Now what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw in Suhail ibn Amr was that this person speaks really well. He has that strength. So what does Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says? That someday, maybe someday, he will use this advantage to defend Islam. You never know. Okay, so that's the foresight Rasulullah has. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was saying that maybe one day the tongue of Suhail will be used by him for the good of Islam. So maybe Suhail might become Muslim, and if he becomes Muslim, maybe he uses his tongue to protect Islam. Okay. When Rasulullah sallallahu, now this is many years later. Now this is Badr. Badr was in the second year of Hijrah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam died in the 11th year of Hijrah. So after 9 years, okay, 9 or 10 years. So when Rasulullah died, all of the Arabs started to become apostates. Now the reason what happened was that जैसी Rasulullah sallam की death हुई थी, a lot of the people, they started becoming non-Muslim. Okay, all of the Arabs started becoming non-Muslim because it was a big fitna, and we will study this during the life of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu. Okay, Suhail bin Amr radhiyallahu anhu, who became Muslim, was the reason for the steadfastness of the people of Makkah. Now, even the people of Makkah, they were getting a bit wavery, right? Now Rasulullah is dead. Should we remain Muslim or not? And the reason why they remained Muslim was because of Suhail bin Amr. Why? He would say, "O people of Quraysh, don't be the last people to enter Islam and the first people to leave it. Whoever we are suspicious of, we will behead him." These words kept the people of Makkah firm on Islam. What does he say? Yeah, O people of Makkah, you were the last people to come into Islam. Because when Fatah Makkah happened, then people started becoming Muslim in Makkah. So he's saying, he's taunting the people of Makkah that you're the last people to become Muslim. Don't be the first people to leave it, right? And if I find somebody suspicious of disbelief, I will cut off their head. So Suhail bin Amr was the reason why none of the people of Makkah became apostates. They did not leave Islam. Apostasy का क्या मतलब होता है? इस्लाम छोड़ देना, मुर्तद हो जाना. ठीक है? So that was the way he paid back Islam and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, I'm going to pause here. I'm going to go back now, and we will discuss about what other conditions were placed on the prisoners of war. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the prisoners of war who could teach reading and writing that if you teach 10 children to read and write, that will be your ransom. So some of the learned prisoners of war who couldn't afford to ransom themselves, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that you teach the children, 10 children, if you can teach them to read and write, you can go. Okay, you can be released. Now, this tells us the importance of education and literacy in Islam. This is very important, guys. That's why in your young age, make sure you learn to read. Not WhatsApps, not Snapchats, not Instagrams, not Facebooks. Read books. Learn from them. And write small essays also of your thoughts. Not for school only. Okay, what did Chayan think? Even, for example, just be creative. Looking at the sunset, right? What do you think about the sunset? What do you think about winter? Just being creative. So that will then teach you how to write. That will teach you how to learn. Okay. Now, what is the Islamic ruling on the prisoners of war? The ruling of the prisoners of war is it is up to the Muslim imam or the leader to determine the fate of this is a typo, fate of the POWs. You have a choice of executing them, freeing them without ransom, so you can just free them. You can free them with ransom. You can ask money for them. Enslave some of the POWs. You can just keep them. So Muslims have their own Sharia. We don't need to follow worldly rules. So it depends really on the situation. It really depends on the Sharia. It really depends on the ruling of the Imam. Okay, and this already sets for us what the Geneva Convention is. We don't need another Geneva Convention. Okay. What we follow is the Sharia of Islam. Okay. Now, Rasulullah has become victorious, alhamdulillah, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sends Abdullah ibn Rawaha and Zayd ibn Harisa raziyallahu ta'ala anhu to deliver the news to the people of Medina. Abdullah ibn Rawaha raziyallahu ta'ala anhu is one of the Ansar, and Zayd ibn Harisa is one of the Muhajirin. It is also the person who Rasulullah adopted as his son. Okay, so he's somebody very close to Rasulullah. Abdullah ibn Rawaha raziyallahu anhu went to a valley, the upper region of Medina, and delivered the news in the house of each of the Ansar. Now just put yourself in the people of Medina, that you have a weak army and you were facing the Quraysh, the big army, three times as big as your army. So how much stress would you have? How much anxiety would you have? And you would expect to hear the worst news. But what news do you hear? You hear the news from Abdullah ibn Rawaha raziyallahu anhu that the Muslims have won. That's the news that he delivers. Yeah. Zayd ibn Harisa raziyallahu anhu went to the center of Medina to deliver the news. He goes to the upper part, Abdullah ibn Rawaha, and Zayd ibn Harisa raziyallahu anhu, he goes to the central part. Zayd ibn Harisa raziyallahu anhu was riding the camel of Rasulullah. As he entered, he was naming all the people who were killed during the battle of Badr. Okay. And he used to say Utbah was killed, Abu Jahl was killed, and so on and so forth. Okay, now the whole crowd, when Zayd was mentioning all the famous leaders of Quraysh who were killed, the Munafiqeen and the Jews said, this man doesn't know what he's talking about. He's confused and he has run away from the battlefield. Now the Jews of Medina and the Munafiqeen of the Medina, who they were thinking this is too good to be true. How can the Muslims beat the Quraysh? How could the Muslims kill all of these big leaders like Utbah bin Rabi'a, Umayyah bin Khalf, and Abu Jahl, and so on and so forth, right? How could they do this? This is impossible. So they started to say that this person, Na'uzubillah, Abdullah ibn Rawaha, he's gone mad and he's run away from the battlefield. Okay, because the Munafiqeen and the Jews, they were in the business of sowing seeds of discord. Okay. And Na'uzubillah, these people started saying Muhammad himself was killed, and the evidence is that Zayd is riding the camel of Rasulullah, and they started spreading all types of rumors. Now they're accusing and alleging that Rasulullah had died, Na'uzubillah, in battle, and the evidence is that he is riding the camel of Rasulullah. Zayd ibn Harisa is riding the camel of Rasulullah. So these Munafiqeen, they couldn't accept what happened. Okay. 1 second. So there was a person called Osama, and Uthman stayed behind to take care of Ruqayya and the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Usman bin Affan raziyallahu anhu, who was the fourth caliph, the third caliph of Islam, he was the husband of Sayyidina Ruqayya raziyallahu anhu, who was the daughter of Rasulullah. So he stayed behind. And another person, Usama. Usama went to his father Zayd ibn Harisa and said, "Oh father, is the news that you were telling us true?" Now Usama is the son of Zayd ibn Harisa. He was known as Usama bin Zayd. He was very young at the time. And he's actually questioning his father. Father, what you're telling us, is that actually true? Did it happen? And then Zayd ibn Harisa said, yes, my son, it actually did happen. Okay. People would go up to and ask Abdullah ibn Rawaha if the news that Zayd was delivering was true, and he would say, yes, it is true, and tomorrow Rasulullah is going to bring the captives. Now this was amazing news, something that they did not expect. Yeah. People had such difficult time in believing what happened. A force of little over 300 defeats 1,000 and kills the most famous leaders of them. The news was too good to be true, like I said to you, right? इतनी बड़ी defeat कर दी उन्होंने. Okay. All right. So the next day, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam enters Medina with the prisoners. Now he's actually entering Medina, right? The prisoners were kept in a specific location, so all of them were kept in one location. Suhail bin Amr, when Sauda, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, saw Suhail bin Amr's hands tied to his neck. Now this is that leader of Quraysh, and Sauda was the wife of Rasulullah. She says to Suhail bin Amr, why didn't you die as noble men? Rasulullah overlooked that statement and said, are you asking them to fight the messenger of Allah? Now Sauda is saying to Suhail bin Amr, why did you give up? Why didn't you fight like noble men? So Rasulullah sort of ignored that point and said, are you asking him to fight me? So it was basically to say that, look, why did you give up to the Quraysh? He said this because what Sauda's question meant was that why didn't you fight instead of being defeated? And obviously, if he were to fight, then he would fight against Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Yeah, so it was an awkward thing to say. Sauda apologized for what she said. Ya Rasulullah, when I saw him in that state, I couldn't help but make a statement. Her emotions overwhelmed her when she saw Suhail. So she saw Suhail in such a humiliated situation that she was overcome with emotions. This tells us how humiliated the leaders of Quraysh were that day because of their disbelief and kufr and the way that they dealt with the Muslims. The next day, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam enters the day with the prisoners. And Rasulullah also stopped at a place called Roha to receive congratulations from all the people who were now coming. It was the sunnah of Rasulullah that when he was returning to Medina, he would stop just outside of Medina first. He would send news that I'm here so that his family, everybody could get ready. They didn't have mobile phones at the time. So he never liked to surprise people like that, right? He would stop 1 or 2 days before, send a messenger that I'm here, tomorrow I will come, so they can prepare the food, they can prepare themselves, and so on and so forth. So we are going to stop here now, and inshallah resume next